She only agreed to marry him for 60 days. A cold, ruthless billionaire CEO, no love, no feelings, just a contract. But what happens when the man who doesn't believe in love can't let her go? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more powerful tales like this one. Your support keeps the stories coming. The rain came down in sheets, turning the city into a dark mirror that swallowed headlights and spit them back as streaks. Sophia Lane sat on the stiff leather of the town car's back seat, clutching her second-hand handbag so tightly the handle bit crescents into her palm. The driver hadn't spoken since picking her up from the cafe on Whitley and 9th, only glanced at her once in the rear view when she tried to ask where they were going. "Mr. Cross will explain," he'd said, and the partition slid up. Adrian Cross? Even saying the name in her head made her throat tighten. He wasn't just a billionaire. He was the kind of man newspapers turned into myths. A ruthless deal-maker who could buy or break companies with a phone call. He owned skyscrapers, magazines, even whispers. He was the headline you didn't repeat. At work if you wanted to keep your job. The car glided beneath the awning of Cross Tower, a blade of glass cutting into the night sky. A lobby of marble, light and whispers swallowed her next. A woman in an immaculate black suit took her coat, another guided her to a bank of private elevators, and then Sophia was alone with the hum of cables pulling her toward the top of the world. The doors opened onto a space made of midnight and money. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the city like a constellation map. A fireplace roared low in a long slate hearth. It was more penthouse than office, warm and empty. Until a figure stepped out from the shadows near the windows. Adrian Cross. He wore the kind of suit that had its own gravity. Dark hair, sharp jaw, eyes that could slice through steel. The air shifted around him, like everyone else had to move to make room for the weight he carried. He didn't offer his hand. He didn't have to. "Miss Lane," he said, voice smooth, controlled, like there was no version of this meeting he wasn't already 10 moves ahead of. "Mr. Cross." Somehow she remembered her voice. "You asked to see me?" "I did." He nodded to a low table where 2 glasses waited. "Water?" "Thank you." Sophia sat on the edge of the sofa, as if sinking back would be a confession. She took a sip to steady herself, waking up to the faint citrus on the rim, the quiet roar of the city. Below he didn't sit. He paced to the windows and back with the idle prowl of a man who'd never been told no. "You work part-time at the cafe and part-time at the Midtown Book Exchange. Your mother's medical bills are in arrears. The landlord left a notice yesterday." The glass chilled in her hands. "How?" "I make it my business to know people before I invite them into my home." He met her eyes at last, not unkindly, just exact. "I also know your grades from 2 years at community college. You were on track for a finance degree. You dropped out when your mother's condition worsened. The urge to stand to shield herself from the exposure pressed against her ribs. If this is some kind of charity, it isn't." He reached into his jacket, slipped an envelope from an inner pocket and set it on the table between them. She stared like it might burn. "What is that?" "A contract." His tone was flat, absolute. "I need a wife. Temporarily." Her laugh was a startled thing that escaped before she could catch it. "You can't be serious. I am never anything else." He regarded her for a beat, then continued. "In 60 days, I must secure a particular acquisition that will complete a long-term strategy. My board is restless, the sellers are traditional. They prefer stability, family, a man who values more than profit." "So you want what?" "Window dressing." The words came out sharper than she planned, a prickle of pride rising in self-defense. He didn't flinch. "I want a partner for public events. Someone intelligent, presentable, and discreet, who can read a room and improvise. There will be no intimacy expected. In fact, I prefer to keep clear boundaries. This is a performance, Miss Lane, a business arrangement. And why me? Because you won't mistake it for anything else." Something unreadable flickered in his eyes, And because I can solve problems you currently don't have the resources to solve. The envelope sat there like a dare. Sophia swallowed. What exactly are you offering? 60 days, he said. At the end, a payment substantial enough to pay your mother's hospital debts in full, relocate you to a safer apartment, and cover a return to your degree should you wish. His voice stayed level, but the numbers he named, impossible numbers, ricocheted through her. Her mind skittered through the past year like a highlight reel of defeat. Overdue notices, part-time shifts, grocery lists whittled to bones. Hope had become a ration she measured with an eyedropper. And in exchange I sign that, smile for photographs and pretend to be in love with a stranger? You won't need to pretend love, he said coolly. Only marriage. She set the water down, her hand steadying now that the ground had shifted as far as it could. I have conditions. One of his brows arched, just barely. Let's hear them. First, my mother doesn't know this is a contract. If she asks, we're real. The word scratched her throat. I won't risk her stress. Agreed. Second, I decide what goes to the press. No invasive interviews about my past, no digging into our private life. You will have veto power on personal exposure. Third, if you humiliate me, publicly or privately, I walk and I keep the advance. He studied her, some current of interest sharpening his gaze. You think I would? I think men with power believe apologies are currency. She lifted her chin. I prefer contracts. A slow, unwilling smile ghosted his mouth, there and gone. You'll do. He slid the envelope closer, then produced a fountain pen, heavy and black. 60 days. We rehearse the story, set boundaries, and begin tomorrow night at the Cross Foundation Gala. The word gala fell like a meteor. Sophia imagined glittering rooms where people spoke a dialect of money. I don't have anything to wear. Handled. He pressed a button on the console near his hand. A door at the end of the room opened, and a woman with severe cheekbones and kinder eyes entered, carrying a tablet. This is Anna. She'll oversee your wardrobe etiquette briefings and calendar. Anna gave a small smile that made the room a fraction less cold. We'll take good care of you, Miss Lane. Care. It had been so long since the word didn't feel like a debt. Sophia looked down at the contract. She skimmed pages dense with clauses, penalties, confidentiality. There was a firm, fair logic to it. Lawyers had polished this to a mirror. Her pulse thudded in her ears. She thought of her mother's thin hands, the bruised moons beneath her eyes after dialysis. She thought of school, of the life she'd left suspended like a held breath. 60 days, she said, more to herself than to him. 60, Adrian confirmed. She signed. For a beat, nothing happened. Then the air shifted again, something unspoken snapping into place. Adrian slid the papers back into the envelope, tucked it away, and finally offered his hand. Welcome to the family, Mrs. Cross. The word detonated somewhere behind her. Ribs. Sophia stood, slipped her hand into his, felt the cool surety of his grip. He didn't squeeze. He didn't need to. He was a man who understood leverage. Anna led her down a hall to the private elevator that served the penthouse. We'll do a fitting tonight, she said gently. It's easier if we start quickly. Sophia stepped into the elevator, feeling the soft closing of gilded doors. As the numbers fell, the city rising to meet her, she caught her reflection in the mirrored wall. Wide eyes, a face too tired for 23, a stranger wearing her skin. 60 days, she told herself. A performance, a rescue. But when the doors opened into a private lobby with a corridor leading to a glass bridge between towers, a bridge that fed into a residence the size of a hotel wing, she realized rescue might not be what awaited her. It might be a labyrinth, and at its center a man with a heart locked like a vault. Ready? Anna asked. Sophia stepped onto the glass, the city yawning beneath her, and walked toward the mansion that would be her home, and her ruin for the next 60 days. The Cross Foundation Gala gleamed like it had been cut from crystal. Chandeliers spilled gold over marble, waiters drifted with champagne flutes that never seemed to empty, and every eye in the room turned, subtly, curiously, hungrily, when Adrian Cross entered with Sophia Lane on his arm, her gown a midnight blue silk that draped her like water. Was Anna's choice. Sophia had protested, insisting she'd never worn anything so expensive in her life. Anna only smiled. "You're Mrs. Cross now, even if only on paper. Own it." Sophia didn't feel like owning anything. She felt like an imposter balancing on glass. Heels. The contract, folded and signed, weighed in the back of her mind like a secret that could crack her open at any second. Adrian leaned closer, his breath grazing her ear. "Relax your shoulders, they're watching." She stiffened even more. "That helps," she muttered, lips barely moving. "You wanted veto power on exposure," he said calmly. "This is exposure. Handle it." The command cut, but beneath it was something steadier, something that reminded her he wasn't asking. She forced her spine to straighten, unclenched her fingers from the clutch at her side, and smiled as the next cluster of guests approached. "Mr. Cross," a man boomed, shaking his hand with too much vigor. "And this must be my wife." "Sophia," Adrian said without hesitation. The word wife curled around her like silk and steel. He didn't glance at her when he said it, but he didn't stumble either. It was a role, and he played it flawlessly. The man chuckled. "You keep surprises close to the chest, as always." He looked Sophia up and down, his approval weighing heavier than the compliment. "Better that than keeping secrets," Adrian replied smoothly, and the man laughed again before melting into the crowd. The rest of the evening unfolded in a similar rhythm. Introductions, compliments, whispered speculation. Sophia smiled until her cheeks hurt. She repeated the lines Adrian had coached her on in the car. Where she grew up, how they'd met at a fundraiser, how their romance had been quiet but meaningful, lies polished into gems. But behind the performance, she studied Adrian. He never raised his voice, never faltered. When a rival tried to bait him with an offhand comment about competitors, Adrian parried with a smile so sharp it cut. His control was absolute, except when his hand rested against the small of her back. That touch, subtle and steady, felt less like performance and more like possession. The illusion cracked for the first time when a woman appeared, tall, elegant, and venom wrapped in satin. Jessica Turner. Sophia didn't know her, but she didn't need to. Jessica's gaze swept Sophia head to toe and dismissed her in one blink. Adrian. Jessica's smile was a blade disguised as charm. "I didn't realize congratulations were in order. How sudden." "Jessica." His reply was cool, unreadable. "You remember Sophia?" "I do now." Jessica's eyes lingered on Sophia like she was sizing up cheap fabric. "You've certainly upgraded." Sophia's throat tightened. She knew the type. Women who had money stitched into their bones, who wore power like perfume. This wasn't just an ex. This was someone who wanted Adrian still, maybe always had. "I prefer to think of it as evolution," Adrian said smoothly, his hand pressing more firmly at Sophia's back. "You of all people know I don't settle." The words were meant as a weapon for Jessica, but they sliced Sophia too. She smiled anyway, the way Anna had warned her, smile as if the insult never landed. Jessica leaned in, whispering just loud, enough for Sophia to hear. 60 days? Or will it last until he gets bored?" Sophia froze. Her heart hammered as Jessica glided away, leaving perfume and poison in her wake. She turned to Adrian. "She knows. She suspects." His tone was iron. "Ignore her. I can't. You will." His eyes locked onto hers, a command as cold as the marble underfoot. "If you falter, she wins, and I don't lose." Something in his voice, unyielding, ruthless, chilled her, but beneath the chill was a spark, a warning flare of the man behind the suit. For the first time, she wondered if there was anyone in this ballroom Adrian trusted. Hours later, when the car finally pulled away from the glittering facade, Sophia sank into the leather seat with a sigh. Her feet ached, her face ached, her soul ached. Adrian poured a glass of water from the console, handed it to her. You did well. That's the best I'll get. Well? He studied her, head tilted. You didn't break. Sophia laughed, bitterly. That's the standard? Not breaking? In this world, yes. His voice was low, almost distant. Then softer. Most people do. The words startled her more than any command. For a flicker of a second, Adrian Cross didn't. Sound untouchable. He sounded tired, alone. She wanted to ask what broke him, but the partition slid up between them, ending the conversation before it began. Back at the penthouse, Anna whisked Sophia away to change, reminding her of fittings, press training, posture lessons. Sophia nodded, but her mind wasn't on gowns or smiles. It was on Adrian. On the way, his grip had tightened when Jessica appeared. On the rare softness that had cracked through his armor, the contract said 60 days. But Sophia was beginning to realize 60 days might be enough to destroy her, or change her forever. And as she fell asleep in the vast, unfamiliar bed, one truth sank deeper than any clause on paper. Adrian Cross was dangerous, not just to the world, to her heart. The next morning began not with sunlight but with schedules. Sophia woke to find a leather-bound planner on her nightstand, embossed with a silver C. Inside was a list written in Adrian's precise handwriting. Breakfast at 9, media training. At 11, etiquette briefing at 2, dinner with Adrian at 8. It read less like a day and more like orders. She frowned at the neat ink flipping the page. A note was tucked at the end. Public faces are polished in private. Don't complain. Don't falter. AC Sophia groaned, rolling out of bed. She hadn't expected freedom, but she hadn't expected to feel like she'd enlisted in an army either. Anna was waiting with a tray of breakfast and a sharp eye for posture. You'll need stamina, she said, setting down yogurt, berries, and coffee. Adrian runs on discipline. He expects the same. Sophia muttered. He expects a lot. Anna smirked. That's why people call him ruthless. But you've already lasted longer than most who tried to get close. The comment lodged in Sophia's mind, even through hours of media coaching and etiquette drills. By the time dinner rolled around, she was exhausted enough to consider skipping it. But Adrian didn't seem like the type to tolerate absence. He was waiting in the penthouse dining room, sitting at the head of a table long enough to host a board meeting. The only other chair set was directly beside him. Sit, he said, not looking up from the papers spread across the table. She did, watching him sign, sort, and stack documents. His pen moved like a weapon. Do you ever stop working? Work stops when results are secured, not before. His tone was clipped, but his hand slowed. And you? Have you recovered from last night? Barely. My feet still hate me. His mouth twitched. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was enough to make her pulse trip. You handled yourself well. Jessica didn't shake you. You didn't see my knees under the table. This time the twitch deepened. A shadow of amusement softened his face before he caught it and shuttered it away. You kept control. That matters more than appearances. Sophia tilted her head. Why does she hate me so much, just because I exist? She doesn't hate you, Adrian said flatly. She hates what you represent, proof she wasn't enough. The honesty startled her. So did the edge beneath it, the hint of old wounds. And were you enough for her? His pen stilled. The silence that followed was heavier than stone. Finally, he set the pen down, eyes sharp as flint. Jessica wanted power, not partnership. I don't make the mistake of confusing the two. Anymore. The remark was cold, final, but Sophia had caught it. The anymore. A sliver of the past, sharp enough to cut. They ate in relative quiet. The city sprawled like starlight beyond the windows. But after the plates were cleared, Adrian surprised her by leaning back in his chair. Tell me about your mother, he said. Sophia blinked. Why? Because she's the reason you're here. I want to know what drives you. Suspicion warred, with exhaustion. Still, she found herself speaking about her mother's kindness, the way she sang while cooking, the long months of dialysis, about dropping out of school to keep the bills from crushing them. Her throat thickened, but she pushed through. Adrian listened, really listened. He didn't interrupt, didn't shift his gaze. He sat still as carved marble, but something softened at the edges of his expression. When she finished, silence stretched. For once, it wasn't uncomfortable. Then he said quietly, "You didn't falter, most people would have. You adapted." It wasn't praise exactly, but it felt like it. "And you?" Sophia asked before she could stop herself. "What drives you, Adrian Cross?" The shift was immediate. His jaw tightened, his eyes iced over. "Results, always results." He pushed back his chair. "We're finished here." He left before she could press further, the echo of his footsteps swallowed by the vastness of the penthouse. Sophia sat alone, replaying the flicker of vulnerability she'd glimpsed before he shut it down. Adrian Cross was a fortress. Walls, built high and thick. But tonight she'd seen a crack. Later, as she lay in bed, sleep heavy on her, her mind betrayed her with images. Adrian leaning close at the gala, his hand steady against her back, the unguarded look when she spoke of her mother. The contract said no intimacy. The contract said 60 days, but her heart whispered something different. She was already falling, and she knew with bone-deep certainty that falling for Adrian Cross was the most dangerous risk she'd ever take. The storm didn't arrive with thunder. It came in whispers, in carefully timed headlines, in photographs snapped at angles that told lies better than words ever could. 2 weeks into their contract marriage, Sophia woke to Anna's pale face at her door. "Don't check your phone yet, let Adrian explain." Her stomach sank. Explain what? But Adrian was already waiting in the living room, standing stiff by the windows, jaw carved from stone. A newspaper lay on the table between them. Billionaire's Bride. Gold digger or guardian angel? Beneath the headline, a photograph of Sophia at the gala, Jessica Turner at her side, whispering into her ear. The angle made Sophia's startled face look guilty, conspiratorial. The article dripped with innuendo. A cafe worker who'd ensnared Adrian Cross, whispers of debts, a past scrubbed too clean. Sophia's hands shook as she skimmed. This is lies." Adrian's voice was cold steel. "Jessica!" Of course. Jessica had been waiting, circling like a hawk. Sophia's chest tightened. "How you believe this?" "I believe you let her close enough to stage it," he snapped. "I warned you not to falter." The accusation landed harder than she expected. "So it's my fault she hates me? My fault she twisted a picture?" "You should have anticipated it." His eyes cut into her, but something raw flickered beneath the fury. Fear, maybe, or the ghost of betrayal. "I don't have the luxury of naivety." Her throat burned. "And I don't have the luxury of being perfect. I didn't grow up in your world of knives and contracts. I'm trying, Adrian. But if you think I'm some schemer clawing for your money—" "Stop!" The single word was sharp enough to slice the air. He turned back to the window, his reflection a fractured silhouette against the city. "If I thought you were after my money, Sophia, you wouldn't be here. But don't make the mistake of thinking this us is safe. It isn't." Silence stretched, brittle and suffocating. Sophia's eyes stung, but she refused to cry in front of him. She gathered what dignity she could and said quietly, "Maybe you don't need a wife, Adrian. Maybe you just need someone to blame." Then she walked out, leaving him alone with his empire and his ghosts. That evening she fled to the balcony of the guest suite Anna had moved her into for privacy. The city stretched beneath her, glittering and endless. But all Sophia felt was small, lost in a game she hadn't agreed to play. Her phone buzzed with a message from her mother. "So proud of you, sweetheart. Adrian looks at you like you're his whole world." Sophia pressed the phone to her chest, torn between laughter and tears. If only her mother knew the truth, that Adrian looked at her like a liability, like a risk he couldn't afford. Footsteps sounded behind her. She didn't need to turn to know who it was. "Why are you here?" she asked, voice low. Adrian didn't answer right away. He stood beside her, hands in his pockets, the city lights casting hard shadows on his face. "Because I don't like unfinished conversations," she scoffed. "You mean accusations?" His jaw flexed. "I was wrong." The words were reluctant, dragged out like they weighed more than iron. "Jessica staged it. I had my team trace the leak. She paid the photographer." Sophia blinked. "And yet you still thought—" "I thought," he cut in, "because people close to me have betrayed me before, and it cost me everything." His voice cracked just barely, like a hairline fracture in glass. "I can't afford to make that mistake again." For the first time he looked at her not as his contract wife, not as a liability, but as a woman standing in the storm with him. Vulnerable. Human. Sophia's anger wavered, but the hurt lingered. "I'm not them, Adrian. I didn't sign this contract to destroy you. I signed it to save my mother." The silence between them hummed like live wire. His eyes searched hers, as if trying to read truth not from words but from the marrow of her bones. And then, without warning, the sky broke open. Rain hammered the balcony, cold and relentless. Sophia gasped, stepping back toward the doorway. But Adrian stayed where he was, letting the storm drench him. "Do you ever stop fighting the world?" she asked, watching him, hair plastered to his forehead, suit ruined. He turned to her. Rain, streaming down his face like something unholy, unguarded. "If I stop fighting, I lose." Her heart twisted. He wasn't just ruthless because he wanted to be. He was ruthless because he believed it was survival. And in that moment, soaked and trembling, Sophia realized something terrifying. Adrian Cross wasn't just dangerous to her heart. He was breaking hers without even trying. The rain had passed, but the storm between them lingered. Days blurred into tense silences and unspoken questions, Adrian buried in meetings, and Sophia shadowed by Anna's relentless preparations. Yet no matter how far she tried to retreat, she could feel him everywhere. In the echo of his footsteps down the hall, in the scent of his cologne on the elevator, in the weight of his gaze when he thought she wasn't looking. By the time the Cross Foundation hosted its annual charity auction, Sophia's nerves were frayed thin. The ballroom glittered with jewels and ambition, every guest a shark disguised in silk or satin. Adrian stood beside her, immaculately composed, his hand once again a steady pressure at her back. "Smile," he murmured. She did, but the tension between them was a live wire. She hadn't forgiven him fully for doubting her. And he hadn't forgiven himself enough to say more than those 3 reluctant words. "I was wrong." The auction climbed higher, paintings, diamonds, vacations, and then Adrian did something that shattered her composure. He bid on a necklace, not just any necklace. A delicate chain of sapphires that caught the light like fragments of the night sky. He didn't look at the auctioneer. He looked at Sophia. The gavel fell. Sold. The applause was thunderous, but all Sophia could hear was the roar in her own ears. When the crowd thinned and the music swelled, Adrian pressed the velvet box into her hands. "Wear it," he said simply. Her throat tightened. "Why?" "Because it suits you." She opened her mouth to protest, but his eyes stopped her. Not commanding, not ruthless, just searching. As if he needed her to accept it, not for the show, but for him. She wore it, and when the sapphires settled against her skin, the contract felt thinner than paper. Later that night, in the quiet of the penthouse, she found him on the balcony, jacket discarded, tie loose. For once he looked less like a CEO and more like a man carrying weight no empire could shoulder. "You shouldn't give me things like this," she said softly, fingers brushing the necklace. His jaw tightened. "Why not?" "Because it blurs the lines, and we only have 60 days. He turned sharply, eyes burning. "Do you think I care about the lines anymore?" The words hung between them, raw and jagged. Sophia's heart stuttered. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," his voice was low, rough, "that I can't let you go." Her breath caught. For weeks she'd imagined hearing those words, but not like this. Not torn from him like a confession he didn't want to make. "You don't mean that?" she whispered. "I don't say what I don't mean." He stepped closer, shadows and city light colliding across his face. "From the moment you walked into my office, you've undone me. And I hate it. I hate needing you, Sophia." "But I do," her pulse thundered. "You don't need me, you need control. And when this ends, when the 60 days are over—" He cut her off, his voice a growl. "When the 60 days are over, I'll burn the contract myself if it means keeping." "Yo!" The fire in his words scorched her, but so did the pride that twisted them. This wasn't a declaration of love. This was possession, desperation. And yet when he touched her cheek, his hand trembling just enough for her to feel, she couldn't pull away. "You'll break me," she whispered. "I already am broken," he replied. Then his mouth was on hers, fierce and hungry, like a dam bursting. The kiss was not gentle. It was years of walls crashing down, of chains snapping. She melted into him, hands fisting in his shirt, heart warring with every warning her mind screamed. They stumbled inside, the city forgotten, the storm outside replaced by the one between them. For the first time, the contract's rules shattered, completely. Hours later, Sophia lay tangled in sheets, breath unsteady, body aching with the memory of his touch. Adrian sat on the edge of the bed, head bowed, as if he'd committed both a crime and a miracle. "This wasn't supposed to happen," she whispered. "No," he admitted. His voice was raw. "But it did. And I don't regret it." Her heart clenched. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe this was more than possession, more than desperation disguised as desire. But when he left the bed, pulling his shirt back on like armor, she knew the storm wasn't over. It had only just begun. The 60 days passed faster than Sophia expected. Too fast. Between galas, charity events, dinners with board members, and stolen moments that blurred the lines of their contract, time slipped like sand through her fingers. But as the final day arrived, reality came crashing back. Anna appeared at Sophia's door that morning with a garment bag. "Your last public event," she said softly, as though the words themselves could wound. "After tonight, the contract ends." Sophia traced the zipper with numb fingers. Last. The word should have felt like freedom. Instead, it hollowed her. That evening, Adrian and Sophia walked into a gala honoring Cross Enterprises' newest acquisition, the very deal that had sparked their arrangement. Cameras flashed, glasses clinked, and Adrian's board beamed, congratulating him for his success. He played the part flawlessly, every inch the untouchable CEO, but Sophia couldn't ignore the silence between them. No whispered cues, no secret glances. Just distance. Jessica Turner approached as venomous as ever. "Well, Mrs. Cross," she purred, "you've done your job. 60 days of glitter, smiles, and lies. I wonder what the world will say when you disappear tomorrow." Sophia forced a smile. "The world can say what it wants. I know the truth." Jessica tilted her head, eyes narrowing. "And what truth is that?" "That I kept my dignity intact," Sophia said firmly, "and that's more than you can claim." Jessica's smirk faltered, just enough for Sophia to savor the victory. But as Jessica vanished into the crowd, Sophia's heart ached. Winning a battle meant little if she was about to lose the war, her war with her own heart. Back at the penthouse, she packed quietly. The necklace Adrian had given her lay on the dresser, sapphires catching the lamplight. She stared at it, torn between leaving it behind as a symbol of goodbye or taking it as proof that for a moment he had seen her. The door opened. Adrian stepped inside, loosening his tie, eyes sharp, even in exhaustion. "You're leaving." "It's what we agreed," Sophia said softly. "The contract is finished." He crossed the room in 2 strides, stopping just short of touching her. "And that's enough for you? To walk away as if nothing happened?" Her voice cracked. You told me not to confuse this with love. You told me it was business. I lied. The admission ripped through the air like thunder. Sophia's breath caught. Adrian's control, his fortress of composure, cracked wide open. I told myself I didn't need anyone, he said, voice raw. That I couldn't risk it. But you... He reached for her hand, gripping it tightly. You've undone everything. I can't sleep without thinking of you. I can't walk into a room without searching for you. 60 days was supposed to be enough, but it isn't. It will never be. Tears stung her eyes. Adrian, I'm not asking for a contract anymore. He dropped to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside, a diamond ring gleamed, simple but breathtaking. I'm asking for forever, no clauses, no conditions, just us. Sophia's heart pounded. All the fear, the doubt, the pain of the past weeks rose like a tide and broke. She saw him, not the billionaire, not the ruthless CEO, but the man who had listened to her stories of her mother. The man who had stood in the rain and admitted he was already broken. The man who had risked his empire to shield her name. Yes, she whispered, the word trembling on her lips. Then stronger. Yes, Adrian, forever. Relief washed over his face, raw and unguarded. He slid the ring onto her finger, then rose and kissed her. This time, not out of desperation, not out of possession, but out of love. Fierce, unshakable. Sayonara, sir. Weeks later, Sophia stood beside Adrian at a press conference, the cameras once again flashing. But this time, there was no contract, no pretense. Adrian announced their engagement publicly, his voice steady, proud. Reporters shouted questions. Jessica's face was nowhere to be seen, and Sophia only smiled, her hand entwined with his. Later, as they slipped away from the noise and into the quiet of the penthouse, Adrian pressed his forehead to hers. 60 days gave me everything I didn't know I needed, he murmured. And what's that? She teased gently. You. Sophia smiled through tears, resting her head against his chest. For the first time in years, she felt safe. Not because Adrian Cross was powerful, but because Adrian Cross was hers. And as the city lights blazed beneath them, she knew the truth. Some contracts end. But love, the kind they had found, was built to last forever.